owned, now belongs to you. I stayed silent. Not because I didn't hear him, but because I didn't understand him. And then he said the number. $50 million. Just like that. No build-up. No explanation. Just a number that didn't belong to my reality. I stood there after the call ended, not moving, not reacting, just trying to process what had just happened. Because money like that doesn't just change things, it redefines them. And suddenly, everything I had been noticing, everything I had been feeling about Vanessa, made sense in a way it hadn't before. Not because of what I had, but because of what she thought I didn't. When I walked back inside, nothing had changed. The music was still playing. People were still laughing. Conversations continued like nothing had happened. And there she was, standing in the center of it all, holding a glass, smiling, completely unaware that everything had shifted. I didn't say anything. I didn't interrupt. I just watched. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need to be forced. It reveals itself on its own. And then it happened. She raised her glass, tapped it lightly to get everyone's attention, and with a smile on her face, she said something that erased every doubt I had ever tried to ignore. To finally getting rid of him. Laughter filled the room. People cheered. Glasses clinked. But in that moment all I felt was clarity. Because she didn't just joke. She revealed the truth. And what she didn't know was that everything had just changed. The strange thing about moments like that is not the noise around them. It's the silence inside you. While everyone else was laughing, clinking glasses, treating her words like a harmless joke, something inside me had already gone quiet. Not shocked. Not angry. Just still. Because what she said didn't confuse me. It confirmed everything I had been slowly realizing over the past few months. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was truth, delivered casually, like something she didn't even feel the need to hide anymore. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, watching her. Watching the way she smiled, the way she blended back into the group like nothing had happened, like what she said didn't carry weight. And maybe to her it didn't. Maybe in her mind, it was just a moment, just a line, just something said in a room full of people who weren't paying attention deeply enough to understand it. But I was. And that was the difference. Because when you're connected to something, you hear it differently. You feel it differently. And once you do, you can't unhear it. I didn't confront her. Not then. Not there. Because confrontation in a moment like that isn't about clarity, it's about reaction. And I wasn't reacting anymore. I was observing. I picked up a drink, not because I wanted one, but because it gave me something to do with my hands, something to ground me in a moment that suddenly felt detached from everything around it. People kept talking. Conversations kept moving. The room carried on like nothing had shifted. But for me, everything had. She walked over to me a few minutes later, her expression relaxed, almost playful, like she hadn't just said something that ended everything we were. "You've been quiet," she said, tilting her head slightly, studying my face as if she was trying to read something. I looked at her for a moment, not searching for answers anymore, just seeing her. Really seeing her. "Just thinking," I replied calmly. And that was the truth. But not in the way she assumed. "What about?" she asked, taking a sip of her drink, her tone light, casual, like we were still exactly where we used to be. "About timing," I said. She frowned slightly, not understanding but not pressing either. And that was another thing I noticed. She didn't push anymore. Not like she used to. Not because she respected boundaries, but because she wasn't invested enough to go deeper. Surface-level interaction had become enough for her. And that realization settled in quietly like everything else. We stayed there for a while longer, but I wasn't really there anymore. I watched her move through the room, the way she interacted with people, the way her energy shifted depending on who she was talking to. It wasn't new. I had seen it before. But now I wasn't ignoring it. I wasn't explaining it away. I was seeing it exactly as it was. And once you reach that point, something changes. Not in a dramatic way. Not emotionally. But mentally. You stop trying to hold on to what something was, and you start accepting what it is. When we got home later that night, the energy was different. Not tense. Not uncomfortable. Just distant. She kicked off her shoes, placed her bag on the chair like she always did, moving through the space with a familiarity that used to feel shared. Now it felt separate. "You're still quiet," she said, walking into the kitchen. I leaned against the wall, watching her. "Do you want me to say something?" I asked. She shrugged slightly. "I mean, you've been acting weird since earlier." Weird. That word almost made me smile. Because from her perspective, nothing had happened. Nothing important. Nothing worth addressing. "I'm just processing," I said. "Processing what?" she asked, finally turning to look at me. And there it was. The moment, the opportunity to ask, to confront, to dig deeper. But I didn't take it, because I didn't need to. Everything, I replied simply. She looked at me for a second, like she was deciding whether or not to push further. But then she didn't. She turned back to what she was doing, like the conversation wasn't important enough to continue. And that, more than anything, told me everything I needed to know. Because when something matters, you stay in it. You lean into it. You try to understand it. But she didn't. She let it go. That night I didn't sleep much. Not because I was upset, but because I was thinking. About everything. About her. About us. About the call. About what I knew now and what she didn't. Because the reality was simple. Nothing about me had changed in her eyes. I was still the same man she had just toasted about leaving. The same man she had slowly disconnected from. The same man she believed didn't have enough. And that perspective was still active. Still real. Still influencing every decision she made. The only difference now was that it wasn't true. But she didn't know that. And that created something powerful. Not revenge. Not anger. Clarity. Because now I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't wondering how she would act if things were different. I knew how she acted when she believed I had nothing. And that was more valuable than anything I had just inherited. The next morning felt normal. Almost too normal. She moved through the apartment like nothing had happened. No tension. No awkwardness. No acknowledgement of the moment from the night before. And that, more than anything, confirmed it. Because if something truly matters, it lingers. It shows up in small ways. But this didn't. She had already moved past it. "I'm going out later," she said while getting ready. "With who?" I asked. "Just friends," she replied. Simple. Vague. Unimportant. "Okay," I said. And I meant it. Because I wasn't asking out of concern anymore. I was observing out of clarity. She left shortly after, and as the door closed behind her, I felt something settle inside me. Not break. Not react. Settle. Because everything had already been decided. Not by me. By her. Through her actions, her words, her choices. She had already shown me exactly who she was in the version of reality she believed in. And now, I had to decide what to do with that. Not emotionally. Not impulsively. Strategically. Because once you see the truth that clearly, you don't rush. You move carefully. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I had just gained. Not just the money. The perspective. And perspective changes everything. There's a moment in every situation like this where things stop feeling uncertain and start feeling clear. Not because something new happens, but because everything that's already happened finally aligns in a way you can't ignore anymore. That's where I was now. Not questioning. Not guessing. Just seeing. The next few days didn't bring anything dramatic. There were no arguments, no confrontations, no sudden changes that would have made it obvious something was wrong. And that's what made it more real. Because when something ends quietly, it doesn't need noise to prove it. It just becomes. Vanessa moved through those days like nothing had shifted. She talked when it was necessary, responded when I spoke, maintained just enough interaction to keep things functional. But the connection, the thing that once made everything feel like it had meaning, was gone. Not damaged. Not struggling. Gone. And the way she carried herself made it clear that she didn't feel the loss of it. If anything, she seemed lighter, like something she no longer needed had been removed without effort. I started noticing details I would have ignored before. The way she checked her phone more often, not casually but with focus. The way she smiled at messages that had nothing to do with me. The way her attention drifted even when we were in the same space. None of it was obvious enough to call out. None of it was direct enough to accuse. But together, it formed something undeniable, a pattern that pointed in one direction. One evening she came home later than usual. Not dramatically late, but later than what used to be normal for us. When she walked in, there was no explanation, no acknowledgement of the time. Just the same calm, detached energy she had been carrying for days. "You're home late," I said, not accusing, just stating it. She glanced at me briefly, then looked away. "Yeah, I was out," she replied. That was it. No detail. No effort to fill the space that used to exist between us. "What were you doing?" I asked. "Just out," she said again. That answer might have been enough before. Might have felt normal, even casual. But now it felt intentional. Like she wasn't just avoiding details, she didn't see a reason to give them anymore. And that difference mattered more than anything she could have said. I nodded slightly, not pushing further. Because I didn't need more information. I already had enough. Not about what she was doing, but about how she was choosing to exist in relation to me. And that was the real answer. She moved past me, heading toward the bedroom, already disengaged from the conversation before it even had a chance to continue. And as I stood there watching that moment pass without resistance, something inside me settled again. Not disappointment. Not anger. Just confirmation. Because every time something like that happened, it reinforced what I already knew. The next day I noticed something else. She started putting more effort into how she looked before going out. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that would seem unusual to anyone else. But enough for me to see it clearly. The kind of effort that comes from intention. The kind that isn't random. The kind that's directed somewhere. Going somewhere special? I asked casually. No, she said, adjusting her hair in the mirror. Just out. That same answer again. Simple. Controlled. Empty. Want me to come? I asked. The question wasn't emotional. It wasn't hopeful. It was deliberate. She paused for a second, just long enough to show that she had considered it, not seriously but enough to form a response. I think I just need some space, she said. And there it was. Space. The word people use when they're already gone but haven't physically left yet. I nodded. Okay. No argument. No reaction. Because I wasn't trying to hold on to something that had already been released. She left shortly after, and as the door closed behind her, the apartment felt different again. Not empty. Just clear. Like everything unnecessary had been removed, leaving only what mattered. And what mattered now wasn't what we had. It was what I understood. Hours passed before she came back. And when she did, the same pattern repeated. Short answers. No details. No effort to reconnect. Just presence without engagement. And in that repetition, something became undeniable. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't confusion. This was direction. She wasn't drifting. She was moving. And she knew exactly where she was going. That night, I sat alone in the living room for a while after she went to bed. Not thinking about her. Not replaying anything. Just sitting with everything I had seen, everything I had heard, everything I had finally understood. Because once clarity reaches a certain point, it doesn't feel heavy. It feels light. It removes doubt. It removes hesitation. It removes the need to question. And in that moment I realized something important. This wasn't about her leaving. It was about when she decided to leave. Because she didn't leave when things got difficult. She didn't leave because something broke. She left because she believed there was something better. Something more valuable. Something beyond me. And that belief was the real truth. Not her actions. Not her words. Her perception. Because perception drives everything. And her perception of me was already gone. The next morning she barely spoke. Not in a rude way. Not intentionally. Just absent. Like conversation itself had become unnecessary. I'll be out again later, she said. Okay, I replied. No questions. No interest. Because I wasn't looking for connection anymore. I was watching the end of something that had already ended. And then as she walked out the door again, something became completely clear. This wasn't about waiting to see what she would do next. I already knew. The only thing left was what I was going to do next. Because now I wasn't operating from emotion. I was operating from truth. And truth doesn't rush. It doesn't react. It decides. And I was getting closer to that decision with every moment. Not about her. About me. About what I would accept. About what I would walk away from. And most importantly, about what I would reveal. Because the reality she believed in was about to change. And when it did, everything would shift. Not for me. For her. By the time everything reached that point, I wasn't waiting for something to happen anymore. I wasn't hoping for clarity. I already had it. What I was seeing now wasn't confusion or hesitation. It was movement. Quiet, steady, intentional movement away from everything we had been. And the more I observed it, the more I realized something important. This wasn't sudden. It hadn't started recently. It had been building for a long time, slowly shifting direction while I was still trying to believe we were standing still. The apartment felt different now. Not because anything physically changed, but because the meaning behind everything had. The same furniture, the same routines, the same shared space. It all looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. It felt divided. Like two people existing in the same place, but no longer sharing anything real between them. And the strange part was, she seemed completely comfortable in that version of things. There was no internal conflict in her. No hesitation. No struggle. She had already adjusted. That evening she came home earlier than usual. For a moment I thought something might be different. Not because I expected it, but because patterns create assumptions. But as soon as she walked in, I saw it again, that same detached calm, that same quiet distance in the way she moved. She placed her bag down, glanced around briefly, then looked at me like I was just another part of the room. "We need to talk," she said. There was no emotion in her voice. No tension. Just decision. I nodded slowly. "Okay." She didn't sit right away. She stood there for a second like she was organizing her thoughts, not emotionally but structurally. Like this conversation had already been prepared. And in that moment I understood something before she even said it. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a reaction to something recent. This was something she had already decided long before now. "I've been thinking about things," she said finally, her tone steady. I didn't interrupt. I didn't ask what things. Because I already knew. "I don't think this is working anymore." And just like that, it was said. No build-up. No explanation. Just a conclusion. I looked at her, not searching for meaning, not trying to interpret anything. Because there was nothing left to interpret. She had said exactly what she meant. And more importantly, she believed it. "Okay," I replied. That was it. No resistance. No questions. No attempt to fix anything. And that seemed to catch her off guard for a second. Not dramatically, but enough. Like she expected something else. A reaction. Emotion. Something that would validate the weight of what she had just said. But I didn't give her that. Because the weight wasn't in her words anymore. It had already settled long before this moment. "You're not going to say anything?" she asked. "I don't think there's anything left to say," I replied calmly. And that answer did something. Not to me. To her. Because for the first time, there was a slight shift in her expression. Not regret. Not doubt. Just awareness. Like she realized this wasn't going to play out the way she expected. "I just think we want different things," she continued, almost like she needed to fill the space. And that sentence was familiar. Not because it was new. Because it was convenient. It made the decision sound mutual. Balanced. Reasonable. But underneath it was something simpler. She didn't see value here anymore. And she didn't want to stay where she didn't see value. "I understand," I said. And I meant it. Not because I agreed with her reasoning. But because I understood her perspective. Completely. "I don't want things to get messy," she added. And that line said more than everything else. Because she wasn't thinking about the relationship. She was thinking about the outcome. The process. The transition. She had already detached emotionally. Now she was managing logistics. "They won't," I said. Simple. Direct. Controlled. And for a moment there was silence. Not uncomfortable. Not tense. Just empty. Because there was nothing left between us that needed to be expressed. She nodded slightly, like something had been confirmed. "I'll start looking at places," she said. That part was quick. Efficient. Like she had already considered it. And again, that told me everything. This wasn't a decision she made today. This was a decision she was finally saying out loud. "That makes sense," I replied. No hesitation. No attachment. Because I wasn't holding on to something that had already been released. She looked at me for a second longer, like she was trying to read something in my reaction. But there was nothing there for her to find. Not because I was hiding anything. Because there was nothing left to hide. Everything had already been understood. "I didn't think it would be like this," she said quietly. And that sentence was the only moment that felt real. Not emotional. Not deep. Just honest. "Neither did I," I replied. And that was the truth. Not about the ending. But about how it ended. Quietly. Without conflict. Without emotion. Without resistance. Because sometimes, when something is truly over, it doesn't need to break. It just stops. That night, we stayed in separate parts of the apartment. Not intentionally. Not discussed. Just happened. Like everything else. Natural. Unspoken. Final. And as I sat there, alone, in a space that used to feel shared, I realized something that changed everything. She didn't leave because something went wrong. She left because she believed something better existed for her. And that belief was based on what she thought I was worth. Not who I was. What I represented. And that difference was the entire story. Because what she didn't know was that everything she based her decision on was incomplete. Not wrong. Just incomplete. So, that reality would change. Not for me. For her. Because the version of me she walked away from wasn't real. Not anymore. And when she realized that, it wouldn't undo what she had done. It would only show her what she lost. And by then, it would be too late. When everything finally went quiet, it didn't feel empty. It felt clear. That was the difference. Because silence after confusion feels heavy, but silence after clarity feels complete. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to figure anything out. I wasn't questioning her or myself or what had happened between us. I already understood it. Completely. The apartment was quieter than usual the next morning. Not because she had already left, but because something else had. The connection that once filled the space even when we weren't speaking was gone. And without it, everything felt simpler. Not easier. Just honest. She moved through the room like she always did, calm, composed, already operating in a version of reality where we were no longer tied together. There was no tension between us, no unresolved emotion hanging in the air. Just two people existing separately in a space that used to mean something more. "I'll be out for most of the day," she said, adjusting her bag as she stood near the door. "Okay," I replied. That was it. No follow-up. No curiosity. No attempt to hold on to anything. And that was how I knew this wasn't temporary. She wasn't unsure. She wasn't conflicted. She was certain. And certainty, when it reaches that level, doesn't look dramatic. It looks calm. After she left, I sat there for a while, not thinking about what had ended, but about what had already begun. Because the truth was, everything had already shifted. Not just in the relationship. In my life. The call from the night before hadn't faded. If anything, it had become clearer. More real. More present. And now, for the first time, I had the space to actually process it. My phone rang again mid-morning. The same number. I answered without hesitation. "Good morning, Daniel," the voice said. "This is Michael Hayes from the estate office." "Yes," I replied calmly. "We've prepared everything for you to review. There are a few documents that require your signature, and we'd also like to walk you through the structure of the assets." The structure of the assets. Even the phrasing felt different. Precise. Controlled. Defined. "I'll be there," I said. An hour later, I was sitting in a place that didn't belong to my old life. Clean lines. Glass walls. Quiet professionalism. The kind of environment where everything is intentional, where nothing is left to chance. Mr. Hayes sat across from me, placing a thick folder on the table. "This outlines everything your uncle left behind," he said. I opened it slowly, not rushing, not reacting, just taking in what was in front of me. Numbers that didn't feel real. Assets that extended beyond anything I had ever been part of. Properties. Investments. Structures that connected everything together in a way that wasn't random. It was designed. Carefully. Strategically. And now, it was mine. "The total valuation is just over 50 million, he continued. "This includes liquid assets, real estate holdings, and equity in several private ventures." I nodded slightly, not because I wasn't affected, but because I understood something important in that moment. This wasn't something I had to become. It was something I had inherited. And that difference mattered. Because I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to chase anything. Everything I needed was already there. "Moving forward, we'll assist you in managing everything," he added. "But ultimately, all decisions will be yours." Decisions. That word stayed with me. Because now, for the first time, I wasn't reacting to life. I was directing it. By the time I walked out of that building, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I didn't feel excited in the way people expect you to. I felt aligned. Like something that had been missing context finally made sense. And in that clarity, everything about Vanessa, everything about the past few months, everything about her decision, fell into place. Because now I understood something fully. She didn't leave me because of who I was. She left me because of who she thought I was. And that difference was everything. That evening my phone lit up. Her name. For a moment I just looked at it. Not emotionally. Not with hesitation. Just awareness. Because this moment was predictable. I answered. "Hello." There was a pause. Longer than usual. "Hey," she said. And her voice was different. Careful. Measured. Not the same certainty it had before. "I heard something," she continued. Of course she did. Because information travels. Especially when it matters. "What did you hear?" I asked. "That you inherited something," she said. She didn't say the number. She didn't say the details. Because she didn't fully understand it yet. But she knew enough. And enough changes everything. "I did," I replied. Simple. Clear. Controlled. "I didn't know," she said. And that sentence came too late. Because knowing doesn't change timing. And timing is everything. "You didn't ask," I said. Not harsh. Not emotional. Just true. Silence followed. Not confusion. Not defensiveness. Realization. I think we should talk, she said. And now. There was urgency in her voice. Not before. No. Why? I asked. Because now questions mattered. I made a mistake, she said. And that word, mistake, is what people use when they realize they can't undo something. Only acknowledge it. We already talked, I replied. And that line closed the distance between past and present, because what she said before still existed. I didn't understand everything, she added quickly. I know, I said. And that's the point. That was the truth. Not about money. About perception. Because her decision wasn't based on facts. It was based on what she believed. And she acted on that belief. Fully. Without hesitation. Without doubt. And now. She was reacting to new information. But reactions don't erase decisions. They expose them. I want to fix this, she said. And there it was. The return. But returns only matter when something is still open. And this wasn't. There's nothing to fix, I said. And I meant it. Because this was never about money. It was about value. And she had already shown me how she defined it. This isn't fair, she said quietly. And for the first time, there was emotion. But not the kind that changes outcomes. The kind that comes too late. It is, I replied. Because you made your decision when you thought I had nothing. Silence. Deep this time. Because now, she understood. Not everything. But enough. Enough to see what she lost. Enough to feel it. But not enough to change it. I stepped outside, the air feeling different, lighter, clearer, like everything had settled exactly where it needed to be. Because in the end, this wasn't about winning. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about seeing the truth. And once you see it that clearly, you don't go back. You move forward. Without hesitation. Without regret. Without looking back. Because some people don't lose you when you leave. They lose you when they show you who they are. And by the time they realize it, it's already too late. The total valuation is just over 50 million, he continued. This includes liquid assets, real estate holdings, and equity in several private ventures. I nodded slightly, not because I wasn't affected, but because I understood something important in that moment. This wasn't something I had to become. It was something I had inherited. And that difference mattered. Because I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to chase anything. Everything I needed was already there. Moving forward will assist you in managing everything, he added. But ultimately, all decisions will be yours. Decisions. That word stayed with me. Because now, for the first time, I wasn't reacting to life. I was directing it. By the time I walked out of that building, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I didn't feel excited in the way people expect you to. I felt aligned. Like something that had been missing context finally made sense. And in that clarity, everything about Vanessa, everything about the past few months, everything about her decision, fell into place. Because now I understood something fully. She didn't leave me because of who I was. She left me because of who she thought I was. And that difference was everything. That evening my phone lit up. Her name. For a moment I just looked at it. Not emotionally. Not with hesitation. Just awareness. Because this moment was predictable. I answered. Hello. There was a pause. Longer than usual. Hey, she said. And her voice was different. Careful. Measured. Not the same certainty it had before. I heard something, she continued. Of course she did. Because information travels. Especially when it matters. What did you hear? I asked. That you inherited something, she said. She didn't say the number. She didn't say the details. Because she didn't fully understand it yet. But she knew enough. And enough changes everything. I did, I replied. Simple. Clear. Controlled. I didn't know, she said. And that sentence came too late. Because knowing doesn't change timing. And timing is everything. You didn't ask, I said. Not harsh. Not emotional. Just true. Silence followed. Not confusion. Not defensiveness. Realization. I think we should talk, she said. And now. There was urgency in her voice. Not before. No. Why? I asked. Because now questions mattered. I made a mistake, she said. And that word, mistake, is what people use when they realize they can't undo something. Only acknowledge it. We already talked, I replied. And that line closed the distance between past and present. Because what she said before still existed. I didn't understand everything, she added quickly. I know, I said. And that's the point. That was the truth. Not about money. About perception. Because her decision wasn't based on facts. It was based on what she believed. And she acted on that belief. Fully. Without hesitation. Without doubt. And now, she was reacting to new information. But reactions don't erase decisions. They expose them. I want to fix this, she said. And there it was. The return. But returns only matter when something is still open. And this wasn't. There's nothing to fix, I said. And I meant it. Because this was never about money. It was about value. And she had already shown me how she defined it. This isn't fair, she said quietly. And for the first time, there was emotion. But not the kind that changes outcomes. The kind that comes too late. It is, I replied. Because you made your decision when you thought I had nothing. Silence. Deep this time. Because now, she understood. Not everything. But enough. Enough to see what she lost. Enough to feel it. But not enough to change it. I stepped outside, the air feeling different, lighter, clearer, like everything had settled exactly where it needed to be. Because in the end, this wasn't about winning. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about seeing the truth. And once you see it that clearly, you don't go back. You move forward. Without hesitation. Without regret. Without looking back. Because some people don't lose you when you leave. They lose you when they show you who they are. And by the time they realize it, it's already too late.